A Bridge to Peace. In the spring of 2025, Rome was cloaked in mourning. Pope Francis, the humble pontiff whose calls for peace had echoed across the globe, had passed away, leaving a world grieving and a Vatican preparing for a funeral that would draw leaders from every corner of the earth. Among them was U.S. President Donald Trump, whose brief but transformative meeting with the Pope years earlier had planted a seed of introspection that still guided his leadership. Accompanying him were Elon Musk, the visionary entrepreneur whose curiosity about life's deeper questions had forged an unlikely bond with Trump, and Musk's young son, XAA-12, a bright, inquisitive boy whose presence brought a spark of innocence to the somber occasion. Trump's decision to attend the funeral was personal, rooted in the memory of that sunlit room in the Apostolic Palace where Francis had asked him, "Who do you truly serve?" The question had reshaped his presidency, softening his approach with a focus on compassion and listening. Now, as Air Force One descended into Rome's Fiumicino Airport on April 25, 2025, Trump carried that question with him, its weight amplified by the global tension simmering beyond the Vatican's walls. The war in Ukraine, raging since Russia's 2022 invasion, had reached a critical juncture, with millions displaced, cities reduced to rubble, and the specter of escalation looming. Trump, determined to broker peace, saw the funeral as more than a moment of mourning. It was an opportunity to act. Musk, seated across from Trump on the flight, was uncharacteristically quiet, his usual whirlwind of ideas subdued by the gravity of the trip. X, sketching in his ever-present notebook, broke the silence with a question that cut through the air. Why do people fight wars if they know people will die? Trump and Musk exchanged a glance, the boy's words landing like a pebble in a still pond. "That's what we're trying to fix, X," Trump said, his voice steady but tinged with resolve. "Sometimes it takes a big moment like this funeral to make people stop and talk." Musk nodded, his eyes on his son. "It's not just about stopping the fighting," he added. "It's about building something better after." In Rome, the Vatican welcomed them with quiet reverence. The trio was escorted to a modest guest house near the Vatican Gardens, its simplicity a stark contrast to the opulence of diplomatic summits. Trump paused in the garden, the scent of rosemary stirring memories of his meeting with Francis. Musk, ever restless, paced nearby, while X ran ahead chasing a butterfly. That evening, they joined a vigil in St. Peter's Square, where thousands held candles, their flickering lights a silent prayer for peace. Trump stood beside Musk, X clutching his father's hand, and felt the weight of the memento world united in grief, yet divided by conflict. The funeral mass on April 26, 2025, was a solemn spectacle in St. Peter's Basilica, attended by over 50 heads of state, royalty, and religious leaders. Trump, Musk, and X took their seats near the front, the boy's sketchbook open to a drawing of a candle against a starry sky. Among the dignitaries was Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, whose weary but defiant presence drew applause from the crowd as he entered. Trump had been informed that Zelensky would attend, and their teams had arranged a private meeting before the service, a moment facilitated by French President Emmanuel Macron and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who had been urging progress in peace talks. Inside the basilica, in a small alcove framed by marble columns, Trump and Zelensky sat on simple red chairs, their knees nearly touching, their faces intense with focus. No aides, no cameras, just two leaders in a sacred space, the weight of millions of lives between them. Musk and X waited outside, the boy whispering questions about the towering statues, while Musk listened, his mind on the stakes of the meeting. Trump spoke first, his voice low but fervent. Vladimir, I've been thinking about what Pope Francis taught me, about serving the people who don't make headlines, the ones who suffer most. This war, it's killing too many of them. Kids, families, soldiers on both sides. We can't let it go on. Zelensky, his eyes shadowed by years of conflict, nodded slowly. I want peace, Donald, but it must be real-lasting. My people have lost too much to accept half measures. Trump leaned forward, his hands clasped. I know you've heard my plan, Crimea, territorial lines, a ceasefire. I know it's hard, but look around us. He gestured to the basilica's soaring arches. Francis spent his life building bridges, not walls. He'd want us to find a way to stop the dying, to save millions before this spirals into something worse. Zelensky's jaw tightened, the mention of Crimea, a sore point, but he didn't interrupt. I'm not asking you to give up your fight, Trump continued. I'm asking you to trust me to push Putin as hard as I'm pushing you. I told him yesterday, stop the missiles, stop the bloodshed, or I'll hit Russia with sanctions that'll make their economy scream. Zelensky exhaled, his gaze drifting to the altar where Francis's coffin rested. You know what Francis said about peace, he murmured. It's not just silence, it's justice. My people need both. Trump nodded, sensing an opening. Then let's make it happen. A full, unconditional ceasefire, starting today. No more missiles, no more deaths. We'll hammer out the detailed security guarantees, borders, whatever it takes. But we start with silence for the people. The conversation lasted 15 minutes, intense but productive, as they outlined a framework. An immediate ceasefire, high-level talks within days, and a U.S.-led coalition to enforce peace. Macron and Starmer joined briefly, their presence reinforcing the international commitment. As the meeting ended, Zelensky extended his hand. This could be historic, Donald Deef. We get it right. Trump shook it firmly. We will. For Francis. For your people. For mine. The funeral mass began. Its hymns and prayers, a backdrop to the fragile hope born in that alcove. Cardinal Giovanni Battista Re's homily echoed Francis's call to build bridges, not walls. A message that felt like a charge to the leaders present. Trump, seated a few chairs from Zelensky, glanced at Musk, who gave a subtle nod, while X whispered, "Is the war stopping now?" Trump smiled, whispering back, "We're trying, kid." After the service, Trump's motorcade sped to the airport, but not before he posted on Truth Social. Met with Zelensky in Rome. We're close to a deal to end the war. No more missiles, no more deaths. Putin, stop the bloodshed now. Millions are counting on us. The post, raw and urgent, reverberated globally, amplified by his warning of sanctions if Russia didn't comply. Back in Washington, Trump moved swiftly. He dispatched his special envoy, Steve Witkoff, to Moscow, while Zelensky's team prepared for talks in London. Within 48 hours, Russia announced a unilateral ceasefire, halting missile strikes on Kyiv and other cities. Trump, leveraging his economic threats, secured Putin's agreement to direct negotiations with the U.S., France, and the U.K. as guarantors. By May 1, 2025, A historic summit in Geneva saw Trump, Zelensky, and Putin sign the Geneva Accord, a comprehensive ceasefire, a demilitarized zone, and a framework for territorial discussions post-peace. Ukraine retained its sovereignty, with security guarantees from NATO allies, while Russia withdrew forces from key areas, a compromise brokered through relentless U.S. pressure. The accord wasn't perfect. Crimea remained a contentious issue, with Zelensky insisting on economic sanctions to pressure Russia long-term, a stance Trump supported publicly. But the immediate impact was undeniable. The war's death toll, estimated at over 500, stopped climbing. Millions of refugees began returning to rebuild. Humanitarian aid flowed unimpeded, and Ukraine's cities, scarred but standing, saw their first days of peace in years. The global economy, strained by the conflict's ripple effects, stabilized as oil and grain markets eased. In the White House, Trump kept his notebook open, adding a new entry. Francis's question led me here to Rome, to Zelensky, to peace. Serving isn't about winning, it's about saving lives, no matter the cost. He invited Rosa, the housekeeper who had prayed for him, to a private ceremony honoring the accord. "You help me see," he told her, handing her a framed copy of X's candle drawing, now a symbol of hope. Rosa, tears in her eyes, whispered, "You saw the world, Mr. President." Musk, reflecting on the trip, launched a Starlink initiative to restore Ukraine's internet infrastructure, dedicating it to the bridges Francis built. X, now a teenager, kept his sketchbook, adding a new drawing, a bridge spanning a river, candles lining its edges. "For the Pope," he told his father, "and for the people who don't have to die now." In Ukraine, Zelensky addressed his nation, his voice steady but emotional. "We fought for peace, and with Trump's resolve, we found it. This is not the end, but a beginning for our children, our future." The world watched, marveling at the unlikely alliance that had turned a funeral into a turning point. In the Vatican, the new Pope, reading of the accord, smiled faintly, whispering a prayer for Francis, whose legacy of bridges had saved millions. Trump, back in the Oval Office, looked out at the Washington sky, his notebook closed but its lessons alive. The war's end wasn't his triumph alone, it was a shared victory, born of a question that had taught him to listen, to see, to serve. And as the world breathed easier, he knew Francis's spirit had been there, guiding them all to peace.